All right, so all day we have been commemorating the 2012 Marikana Massacre. So it's 9 years ago today. 34 mine workers were killed by police during a wage strike. Today, wreaths were laid at the infamous Koppie, where the men had gathered to show their protest. A commemoration was held in Johannesburg today as well. eNCA Silindelo Masikana is in Marikana. Senior reporter Aviwe Mtila was at the commemoration earlier. Good afternoon to both of you. Aviwe, I'll start with you. And the big question really is, will the widows of the miners killed 9 years ago ever get justice for their husbands' killings?
Charged with murder, 4 of whom have been acquitted. That was asked at the commemoration is, where is the justice? From a simple thing like an apology from both the mining company as well as government is something that they say they haven't seen in the last 9 years. Well, there were promises of compensation. They say that only partly have they been compensated. For example, aside from the 34 miners that were killed by the South African Police Service exactly on this day some 9 years ago, those that were shot along them, none of them have been compensated, while there's still ongoing court cases. It's a conversation that I had with Advocate Dali Mpofu, who's one of the trustees of the Marikana Trust. Let's listen in on that.
Unfortunately, we are very, very far from justice in all the areas that we've been participating in. We got involved in this matter from the 18th of August, 2 days after the actual massacre. And we started with the bail applications of those who were arrested from the Koppie. And since then, we've been pursuing justice for the past 9 years. And unfortunately, none of it has really been delivered. There have been some positives here and there. For example, the arrested, as we reported, the arrested people who were unlawfully arrested have been compensated. But apart from that, the other group, the widows, have only been partially compensated. And the seriously injured people, including people with some severe injuries, have not been compensated at all. So we're still very, very far. And then, of course, there are the other matters that don't involve money directly, the issues that you mentioned of apology, declarations that this will not happen again, the building of monuments and those kinds of issues. That is now going to have to go to court, because despite all efforts from ourselves as the lawyers and even from AMCU to hoping that sanity will prevail, none of that has happened, and therefore we're now going to go directly to the court.
So, Aviwe, what about the promises made to the widows? What has happened to them? How are they doing?
Sadly, they say that they've been failed, both by the government and the mining companies. Simple promises such as the education for their children. After they'd finished their education, they were supposed to be given jobs. They're saying that some of those children are sitting without jobs while they've completed their education. But their basic living conditions as well, Sally. Remember that the plight of this strike was just around the basic income, which would provide better lives for their families. We ourselves, myself and my colleague Silindelo Masikana, saw it over the weekend, the squalor that they still continue to live under, while those companies make billions of dollars every year. It's an issue, in fact, that the president of AMCU, Joseph Matunjwa, touched on, just around the inequality. Let's listen to that.
South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. The monthly pension fund contribution of some CEOs is more than what a rock drill operator earns in a full year. The levels of inequality in South Africa are such that Sibanye CEO has the arrogance to earn 150 million in bonuses per annum, but has the audacity of offering 250 rands wage increase in gold sector for 2021 wage negotiations.
And Slee, I'd like to bring you in here. You have been in Marikana this past weekend, and you're still there now. That Koppie is just, it epitomizes everything that happened. I think none of us will ever forget what that day looked like on our television screens. Talk to me about who is there today and who wasn't there today, and what was said.
Well, you would have noticed that the commemorations today were twofold. We had the official event taking place in Johannesburg, where we had the families of the slain mine workers gathered there with officials from AMCU as well as other political organizations. And what we saw here was the second part of the commemorations, and that was the wreath-laying ceremony here at the infamous Koppie. You would remember that back in 2012, during the days of violence leading up to this particular day, that there were a number of violent scenes and clashes that were taking place between police officers as well as the striking mine workers. But the scene for today here at the Koppie involved laying 34 wreaths at the two scenes. You would remember there was a scene 1 as well as a scene 2 in which the killings took place. And so we saw officials from AMCU. It is an AMCU stronghold in terms of membership here in Marikana, and those AMCU members were then joined by others here in the community to commemorate and honor those who died here. Quite somber scenes, I must say. We saw a lot of singing. We saw everyone gathering, sitting on the Koppie, Sally, you know, just reflecting on the day, reflecting on how far they've come, whether they've seen any changes. And of course the sentiment is that it seems as though it is only the mine workers as well as their union and those that support them that seem to want to continue to recognize and commemorate this day. I was saying to some of our colleagues earlier on that, I mean, when you come to this Koppie, Sally, it's quite astounding that you don't see anything that actually tells you or shows somebody who's never been here that something like what we saw in 2012 took place, that massacre that unfolded before our television screens. And so that was one of the issues that were raised, that it just seems as though 9 years on, there's no will to actually commemorate the day on government's part, and it seems as though there's a concerted effort to try and make people forget, but I don't think any of us will ever forget what happened here.
Yeah, absolutely. And who has spoken? Has there been any presence from the mine owners at all today? Was there an attempt to come to the commemorations, or was it just too tense?
None at all, nothing. What we do know is that those that were here actually took the day off. They were telling me that every year on this day, the mine workers actually take the day off. They don't go to work, some of them that is. And there was absolutely nothing from, you know, whether it's a presence from mine bosses, mine owners, mine managers, even anyone from government to actually come to this particular scene. Nothing. Just the mine workers themselves, as well as their children and community members who made the effort to come here and lay those wreaths. And for them, it's symbolic. You know, it's symbolic for them to have to come here. It's also a reminder for them to say, you know, the struggle continues, and that their colleagues, the mine workers that were killed, should not die in vain, which is why I think we see a concerted effort from those here in this community to actually remember this day. But also what you pick up here in Marikana, Sally, is the frustration with the broken promises, with the lack of service delivery and the material conditions that these people are subjected to live in, saying that it's just so bizarre for them that an area that makes so much money has people living in such poverty.
Slee, what about the 10 people that were killed before the day of the massacre? There were security guards, mine workers, police who were killed, brutally killed in the 10 days, a very bloody run-up to what happened on this day 9 years ago. Do they have a separate commemoration? Is there any rapprochement between those two groups?
I didn't see any of that today, Sally, in terms of separate commemorations for those that died prior, because we know that in total 44 people were killed during the days leading up to this particular to this particular day. And so what we understand, of course, is that there is a recognition that there were people prior to this day who died, but when it comes to actual commemorations, we haven't seen any of that in Marikana in terms of those 10 who died before this day. I think the significance of the commemorations today is the fact that we saw the massacre actually unfolding before our eyes on television, and that the significance of that in a democratic South Africa is what's being highlighted today, that there's clearly still a long road ahead of us.
All right, thank you so much for talking to us. That's eNCA reporter Silindelo Masikana coming to us live from Marikana, and senior reporter Aviwe Mtila, who was at the commemoration.